Sometimes the hardest choices come when you have everything to lose and nowhere left to turn. Vincent Merrick knew that feeling well the day he walked through the gates of Stonewall Correctional, the most dangerous prison in the state, just to keep a roof over his daughter's head. At 44, with his business gone and bills piling up, night security was his last option. He expected violence, chaos, and men beyond saving. But what he found changed everything. Hidden behind those walls was something he never expected, a group of inmates running their own education program, trying to become better men in a place designed to break them. When Vincent discovered their secret, he faced an impossible choice. Could he risk his job and his daughter's future to protect their hope? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The parking lot of Stonewall Correctional facility was nearly empty when Vincent Merrick pulled his aging pickup truck into a space marked staff. Only 3 in the morning carried a particular kind of silence, the world holding its breath between yesterday's failures and tomorrow's uncertain promises. He sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the concrete fortress that would become his workplace for the foreseeable future. The prison rose against the night sky like something out of a nightmare. All grey concrete and razor wire, floodlights casting harsh shadows across the perimeter. Stonewall had been built in the 1970s to house 800 inmates. It now held nearly 2,000. Vincent had heard the stories: riots, stabbings, guards assaulted. This wasn't some minimum security facility where white-collar criminals served soft time. This was where the state sent men it had given up on. He pulled his wallet from his pocket and opened it to the photograph tucked behind his driver's license. Sophie, 15 years old, caught mid-laugh at her birthday party last year before everything fell apart. Dark hair like her mother's, the same quick smile that could light up a room. She was the reason he was here, the only reason that mattered. 6 months ago, Vincent had owned Merrick Construction, a small but respectable contracting business he'd built over 15 years. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Enough to keep Sophie in a good school, food on the table, occasional dinners out. Then came the fall from the scaffold, 20 feet onto concrete. 3 cracked ribs, a shattered wrist, 6 weeks unable to work. In construction, if you're not working, you're not earning. The jobs dried up. Clients moved on. By the time his wrist healed, the business was gone, swallowed by debt and broken promises. He'd tried everything, applied to every construction company within 50 miles. But at 44, with a failed business on his resume, nobody wanted to take a chance. The bills kept coming. The mortgage, utilities, Sophie's school expenses. His savings evaporated like morning dew. Then came the letter from Stonewall. They were hiring, desperate for guards willing to work the night shift. The pay was barely enough, but it was something. Vincent had stared at that letter for 3 days before finally making the call. "You coming in or planning to sleep out here?" Vincent looked up to find a stocky man in a guard's uniform standing beside his truck. Late 50s, grey stubble, eyes that had seen too much. "First night," Vincent said, climbing out of the truck. "Vincent Merrick, Sergeant Howard Rains." The handshake was firm, measuring. "You're the new night security. Heard we were getting fresh meat." He gestured toward the employee entrance. "Come on, let's get you processed before the shift starts." The interior of Stonewall matched the exterior, institutional green walls. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask something deeper and more unpleasant. Rains led Vincent through a series of security checkpoints, each door clanging shut with mechanical finality. "You ever worked corrections before?" Rains asked, signing Vincent in at the main desk. "No, sir. Construction most of my life." Rains nodded, unsurprised. "Most guys who take night shift are either brand new or completely burned out. You'll figure out which category you fit soon enough." He handed Vincent a badge and a set of keys. "Here's the basics. You'll be responsible for rounds on C and D blocks. That's medium and maximum security. Walk each tier every hour. Check cells, common areas, make sure nothing's brewing. What should I be looking for?" "Trouble. It comes in all forms here. Could be a fight getting ready to pop off. Could be contraband, drugs, weapons, phones. Could be nothing at all until suddenly it's everything. Rains started walking again, leading Vincent deeper into the facility. The most important thing to understand about Stonewall is that you're outnumbered. 2,000 inmates, maybe 40 staff on a good day. Night shift, you'll have 6 guards covering the whole facility. They pass through another security door into C block. The cell tier stretched 3 stories high, narrow catwalks connecting each level. Even at 3:30 in the morning, the building wasn't silent. Coughs, murmured conversations, the occasional shout echoing off concrete walls. Most of these men will never bother you if you don't bother them. Rains continued, his voice lower now. They're just doing their time, trying to survive until release. But some, he paused at the entrance to D block, some are different. D block is maximum security, men who can't function in general population. Gang leaders, violent offenders, men with nothing to lose. Vincent peered through the reinforced window into D block. It looked the same as C block, but the atmosphere felt different, heavier, more dangerous. Your job is simple, Rains said. Walk your rounds. Document anything unusual. Don't get involved in inmate business. Don't make friends. Don't make enemies. You're not here to rehabilitate anyone or solve their problems. You're here to maintain order and go home in one piece. Understand? Yes, sir. Rains studied him for a long moment. You seem like a decent man, Merrick. Got that look? Probably got a family, probably hit some hard times, probably think this is just temporary until something better comes along. He leaned against the wall. Maybe it is. But while you're here, remember this. These men are convicted criminals. Some made mistakes. Some are monsters. Your job isn't to figure out which is which. Your job is to treat them all the same, with professional distance. Vincent nodded, absorbing the information. This wasn't what he wanted. This wasn't the life he'd imagined when he started his business, when Sophie was born, when his wife was still alive. But it was what he had now. The rest of the shift orientation passed in a blur of procedures, protocols, and warnings. Vincent met the other night shift guards, a mix of tired veterans and young men looking for steady work. Most barely acknowledged him. New guards came and went quickly at Stonewall. By 5 in the morning, Vincent was on his first solo rounds through C block. The keys jangled at his belt as he walked the tier, checking cell doors, peering through the small windows at sleeping forms. Some inmates were awake, lying on narrow bunks and staring at the ceiling. A few watched him pass with calculating eyes. In cell C247, a man was reading by the dim light filtering from the corridor. Vincent paused, curious despite himself. The man was perhaps 30, dark-skinned, focused intently on the book in his hands. As Vincent watched, the man made a notation in the margin with a stubby pencil. Their eyes met through the window. The inmate didn't look away, didn't hide the book, just held Vincent's gaze for a moment before returning to his reading. Vincent continued his rounds, but something about that brief encounter stayed with him. The book had looked like a textbook. The man's focus had been scholarly, not furtive. When Vincent finally drove home as dawn broke over the city, exhaustion sat heavy on his shoulders. Sophie was already awake, getting ready for school. She looked up when he entered, concern flickering across her face. "How was it?" she asked. Vincent set his keys on the counter and pulled her into a hug. "It was fine, sweetheart. Just walking around, making sure everything's secure. You look tired. Night shift takes some getting used to." He stepped back, studying her face. "You ready for school?" "I guess." She picked up her backpack, hesitated. "We're okay, right? I mean money-wise?" The question hit him harder than any physical blow. She shouldn't have to worry about that. She should be thinking about friends and homework, and which college she might want to attend someday. "We're okay," he said, making his voice steady and sure. "I've got this handled. You just focus on school." After Sophie left, Vincent sat alone in the small kitchen of their rented house. Through the window, he could see the neighborhood waking up. People heading to jobs they probably didn't love, living lives that probably weren't what they'd dreamed about. Just surviving, just enduring. He thought about the inmate reading in his cell, focused on that textbook like it mattered. What was a man in maximum security doing with a college-level book at 5 in the morning? Vincent shook his head. Raines's words echoed back, "Don't get involved in inmate business." He had enough to worry about. Keep his head down, do his job, collect his paycheck. That was the plan. That was survival. But as Vincent lay down to sleep while the rest of the world started its day, he couldn't quite shake the image of that reading inmate's eyes. Intelligent, focused, and somehow defiant of everything Stonewall Correctional was supposed to represent. 3 weeks into the job, Vincent had settled into the rhythm of night shift at Stonewall. The days blurred together. Sleep through the morning, wake at noon, spend the afternoon with Sophie, drive to the prison as darkness fell. Walk the tiers, check the cells, document the quiet hours when most of the world slept, but 2,000 convicted men lay awake with their thoughts. He'd learned the unwritten rules quickly. Don't make eye contact longer than necessary. Don't respond to provocations. Don't show weakness, but don't display aggression either. Exist in a careful middle ground where inmates saw him as neither threat nor target. Most nights passed without incident. The occasional argument between cellmates, someone refusing to comply with lights out, small disturbances that required nothing more than Vincent's presence and a firm voice. He discovered he was good at de-escalation. Years of managing subcontractors and difficult clients had taught him how to stay calm when tensions rose. But tonight felt different. Vincent couldn't articulate why, as he began his 11 o'clock rounds through D Block. The maximum security wing held the same oppressive atmosphere as always, but something beneath the surface had shifted. Conversation stopped as he passed. Eyes tracked his movement with more intensity than usual. He was halfway down the second tier when he saw it, a single sheet of paper lying on the concrete floor near cell D347. Vincent almost walked past. Probably trash. Inmates were always finding ways to pass notes, create makeshift playing cards, anything to break the monotony. But something made him stop and pick it up. The page was covered in handwriting. Not the crude scrawl Vincent had seen in confiscated gang notes, but careful, educated penmanship. At the top, someone had written Hamlet Act 3, Scene 1 in precise letters. Below that, the famous soliloquy had been copied out word for word. To be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles. But what caught Vincent's attention were the margin notes. Someone had analyzed the text with the kind of sophistication Vincent associated with college literature courses. Annotations about Shakespeare's use of metaphor, questions about Hamlet's true intentions, references to other philosophical works. Vincent looked up at cell D347. Through the small window, he could see the inmate he'd noticed on his first night, the man reading by dim light. Tonight, the man was awake, sitting on his bunk with a thick textbook open across his knees. Their eyes met again. This time, Vincent saw recognition there. The inmate knew this was his page. Knew Vincent had found it. Vincent should have kept walking. Should have thrown the paper away or reported it as contraband. Instead, he found himself stepping closer to the cell door. "You dropped something," Vincent said quietly. The inmate stood slowly, approaching the door with careful, non-threatening movements. Up close, Vincent could see he was younger than he'd first appeared, maybe early 30s. Intelligent eyes studied Vincent from behind the small window. "Appreciate you picking that up," the man said. His voice was educated, cultured, not what Vincent expected from someone in maximum security. I've been working on that analysis for a few days. "Shakespeare," Vincent said, holding up the page. "Deshaun Foster." The inmate offered his name like they were meeting at a library instead of through a cell door. "And yeah, Shakespeare. Hamlet specifically. You familiar with it?" Vincent thought back to high school English decades ago. "Read it once. Long time ago? It holds up." Deshaun's mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. Turns out the questions Shakespeare asked 400 years ago about purpose, about action versus inaction, about whether suffering has meaning, those questions don't really change. Vincent glanced at the textbook visible through the window. "What are you reading?" Introduction to Philosophy. Correspondence course through the community college. Deshawn must have seen Vincent's surprise because he continued, I know what you're thinking. What's a guy in D block doing with a college textbook? Fair question. Wasn't going to ask. Most guards don't. Most guards don't care. Deshawn leaned against the cell door. I got a question for you, though. You going to report this? The book, the papers? Technically, it's unauthorized material. Vincent looked down at the Shakespeare analysis in his hand. The careful annotations, the obvious intelligence and effort invested in understanding a 400-year-old play. Why Hamlet? He asked instead of answering. Deshawn seemed to consider whether to respond. Because Hamlet's stuck, he finally said. Stuck between who he was and who he needs to become. Stuck between the world that is and the world that should be. Stuck knowing the right thing to do, but unable to do it because the cost is too high. He paused. Guess that resonates in here. Vincent folded the page carefully and passed it back through the meal slot in the door. Deshawn took it, surprise flickering across his face. Finish your analysis, Vincent said. But maybe keep better track of your papers. He walked away before Deshawn could respond, continuing his rounds with his mind churning. When he reached the end of the tier and started down the stairs, he noticed other things he'd missed before. In cell D312, another inmate had papers spread across his bunk, worksheets of some kind. In D289, someone was writing by flashlight after lights out, hunched over what looked like an essay. Vincent completed his rounds mechanically, but his attention kept drifting back to what he'd seen. This wasn't random. This was organized. Multiple inmates in D block engaged in serious academic work, all of it hidden from official view. The next morning, over breakfast with Sophie, Vincent found himself distracted. Dad, Sophie's voice pulled him back. I asked if you could help me with my history essay. Sorry, sweetheart. What's the topic? Criminal justice reform. We're supposed to argue whether rehabilitation or punishment should be the primary goal of incarceration. She pushed her cereal around the bowl. It's stupid. Who cares what I think about criminals? Vincent looked at his daughter. Bright, privileged with opportunities, no real understanding of what desperation could drive people to do. Then he thought of Deshawn Foster, analyzing Hamlet in a maximum security cell at 3 a.m. Maybe the question isn't as simple as it sounds, he said. Over the next few nights, Vincent paid closer attention during his rounds. He started noticing patterns, certain inmates congregating briefly during recreation time before dispersing. Items being passed between cells, books, papers, pencils. Nothing violent or threatening, but definitely covert. On his 4th night after finding the Shakespeare page, Vincent noticed something else. During his 2 a.m. rounds, he heard voices coming from the direction of the maintenance closet on D block's 3rd tier. Low, intense discussion. He approached quietly. The closet door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, Vincent could see 3 inmates inside, crowded around something on the floor. He recognized Deshawn among them. Can't keep using this space, one was saying. Martinez is getting suspicious. He's already asked why I'm up here so much. We'll figure it out, Deshawn replied. We've made it this far. 3 months without getting caught. We just need to be more careful. Vincent's hand moved to his radio. This was it. Inmates meeting secretly, clearly violating protocol. His job was to report it. Call for backup. Shut it down. But he hesitated. The GED test is in 6 weeks, another voice said. Andre's been working toward this for 2 years. We can't stop now. GED test, education, not a drug deal or gang meeting. Vincent stepped back from the door, his mind racing. He should report this. Clear violation of rules. But something stopped him. The memory of Deshawn's Shakespeare analysis. The dedication in those margin notes. The quiet desperation of men trying to better themselves in a place designed to warehouse them until release or death. He continued his rounds, leaving the closet undisturbed. But when Sergeant Rains caught him in the break room an hour later, Vincent knew his choice had been noticed. Heard some noise up on D3 during your rounds, Rains said, pouring coffee. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Everything okay up there? Couple inmates talking in their cells, Vincent replied. Nothing serious. You checked the maintenance closet? Vincent met his gaze. Didn't see any reason to. Rains studied him for a long moment. Word of advice, Merrick. Things happen in this prison that aren't in the rule book. Sometimes the smart move is to not look too close. Other times, not looking is the fastest way to get hurt or get someone else hurt. Which is this? That's what you need to figure out. Rains set down his coffee cup. But figure it out fast. Because once you make a choice to see something or not see it, you can't unmake it. You understand what I'm telling you? Vincent nodded slowly. He understood perfectly. He'd crossed a line tonight. The question was whether he'd crossed it toward danger or toward something else entirely. When Vincent drove home that morning, dawn painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he found the Shakespeare page folded in his pocket. He must have picked it up again without thinking. He pulled it out at a red light and read Deshawn's final notation. Hamlet's tragedy isn't that he fails to act. It's that he knows what's right but fears the cost of doing it. The question isn't whether to act, it's whether we're brave enough to pay the price. Vincent folded the page and tucked it back in his pocket as the light turned green. Vincent spent the next week observing. Not obviously, he'd learned that much in his short time at Stonewall. But during his rounds, he paid attention to the small details that revealed the patterns beneath the surface. Cell D347, Deshawn Foster. Awake most nights, always reading or writing. Textbooks on philosophy, sociology, psychology. Notes organized in careful folders. Cell D289, Andre Washington. Mid-30s. Covered in faded gang tattoos that spoke of a different life. Now spent his nights working through GED practice tests, erasing and reworking math problems until he got them right. Cell D32, Luis Herrera. Young, couldn't be more than 25. Vincent had pulled his file from the system. Aggravated assault, 8-year sentence. But in his cell, Luis studied English composition, writing essays about fatherhood and redemption. There were others too, maybe 8 or 10 inmates total across D Block, all engaged in serious academic work, all hiding it from official view. On his 9th night after finding the Shakespeare page, Vincent made a decision. During his 3 a.m. rounds, when the prison was at its quietest, he took a detour to the maintenance closet on D3. The door was locked, as it should be, but Vincent had keys to every non-secure area in his assigned blocks. He opened the door and stepped inside. The small space had been transformed. Boxes of cleaning supplies had been pushed aside to create a clear area on the floor. Textbooks were stacked carefully in the corner. Maybe 20 volumes covering everything from basic math to college-level literature. A hand-drawn chart on cardboard tracked study schedules and test dates. Next to it, a makeshift library catalog listed every book, who had it, and when it was due back. Vincent knelt down and examined the catalog. The handwriting was precise, almost artistic. Each entry noted the book title, current reader, and date borrowed. Return dates were carefully tracked. Notes indicated if a book was damaged or missing pages. This wasn't chaos. This was organization, dedication. Someone had invested serious time and effort into creating a system. "You going to turn us in?" Vincent spun around. An older man stood in the doorway, 60s, gray hair, weathered face. He moved with the careful dignity of someone who'd learned to carry himself with authority, even in confinement. "Terence Blackwell," the man said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "I'm guessing you've been watching us for a while now. Noticed you lingering near certain cells during rounds. Seen you studying that piece of paper Deshawn dropped." Vincent stood slowly, hand moving toward his radio. "Before you call that in," Terence continued, "give me 2 minutes to explain what you're looking at. Then if you still want to report it, I won't fight you. But 2 minutes. That fair?" Vincent's hand stopped. Something about the old man's voice, calm, reasonable, the tone of someone used to teaching rather than threatening, made him pause. 2 minutes, Vincent agreed. Terence gestured to the textbooks. "This started 3 years ago. Just me and one other inmate studying vocabulary from a dictionary someone's family sent in. We'd quiz each other during yard time. Nothing formal, just 2 men trying to keep our minds sharp." He picked up one of the textbooks, running his fingers over the cover with something like reverence. Word got around. Other men asked if they could join. We started small, basic literacy GED prep. I was a high school teacher before. He paused. Before I made the worst mistake of my life and ended up here, I knew how to structure lessons, create curriculum. We met in the chapel during prayer time at first. Nobody paid attention to a few inmates reading the Bible together. What changed? Vincent asked. We got more ambitious. Men started wanting real education, college courses, certification programs. We connected with a volunteer on the outside who helped us get materials. Father Brennan, the chaplain who visits on Sundays. He's actually a retired professor. He brings in textbooks, arranges for correspondence courses, helps with the administrative side. Terence set the book down carefully. We've had 6 men complete their GED. 2 are working toward associate degrees. Andre Washington, Cell 289, has been accepted to a community college program. He'll start taking courses next semester if he can stay on track. Why hide it? Vincent asked. If you went through official channels, have you met our warden? Terence's laugh was bitter. Official channels at Stonewall mean months of bureaucracy followed by rejection. This prison doesn't believe in rehabilitation. We warehouse men until their sentences expire, then release them back to the streets with no skills, no education, and no hope. Then act surprised when they come back. He moved to the door, checking the corridor before continuing. But that's not even the biggest problem. You know what happens when certain inmates decide a man is getting too educated, too focused on bettering himself? They see it as weakness, as betrayal of the culture in here. We've had men threatened for reading, books destroyed. Deshawn got jumped last year for helping someone with math homework. Vincent thought about the gang dynamics he'd witnessed, the unspoken hierarchies, the violence always simmering beneath the surface. And the guards? He asked. Terence's expression hardened. Most don't care what we do as long as we stay quiet. But some see any inmate activity they don't control as a threat. We've learned to stay invisible, meet in shadows, keep the books hidden, pretend we're nothing more than the criminals they expect us to be. The 2 minutes had long passed. Vincent should be calling this in, should be documenting everything he'd found, should be following protocol. Instead, he asked, why bother? If it's this dangerous, this difficult, why keep trying? Terence met his eyes directly. Because what else do we have? I'm 63 years old. I'll die in this prison. My sentence is natural life, but I can choose how I spend those years, rotting in despair or maintaining my dignity by using my mind. These younger men, they have a chance. Andre has a son he's never met. 8 years old. When Andre gets out in 3 years, he wants to be someone his boy can be proud of. Not just another deadbeat ex-con, but a father with an education and a future. He gestured to the catalog. This isn't just about passing tests. It's about proving we're more than our worst moments. That we can change. That we deserve a second chance. Vincent looked at the careful organization, the dedicated record-keeping, the worn textbooks that represented hope in a place designed to crush it. How many guards know? He asked. Hard to say. Most look the other way. 1 or 2 actively help, unlock doors at the right times, give us warning when administration's around. But we never know who we can really trust. Vincent picked up the catalog, studying the careful entries. This handwriting. This is yours? 30 years teaching high school English. Old habits die hard. The Shakespeare analysis. Deshawn's work? He's my best student. Has a natural gift for critical thinking. Shame he didn't discover education before he discovered the streets. Vincent set the catalog down carefully, mind racing through implications and consequences. His daughter needed him employed, needed his paycheck, needed stability. Getting involved in an unauthorized inmate program was the fastest way to lose everything. But he thought about Sophie's history essay, about rehabilitation versus punishment, about whether people could change or were forever defined by their mistakes. I need to finish my rounds, Vincent finally said. Terence nodded, resignation in his eyes. Understand, you've got your own problems, your own family to protect. I respect that. Vincent moved toward the door, then stopped. This catalog, you're missing return dates on 3 books. Terence blinked. What? Entries 12, 15, and 22. You've got who has them and when they were borrowed, but no expected return dates. Makes it harder to track if someone's holding on to materials too long. Vincent looked back at the old man. Just an observation. He left before Terence could respond. The rest of the shift, Vincent moved through his rounds mechanically, his thoughts churning. He'd crossed another line tonight, not just looking away but engaging, offering advice, acknowledging the program's legitimacy by treating it like something worth improving. When he got home, Sophie was already awake, studying at the kitchen table. "Morning, Dad," she said without looking up from her textbook. "What are you working on?" "That criminal justice essay. I picked rehabilitation as my argument." Vincent poured himself coffee, watching his daughter frown over her notes. "What made you choose that side?" "I don't know. Just seems like if someone really wants to change, shouldn't we give them the chance? Like, yeah, they did something wrong, but if we just lock them up and throw away the key, what's the point? They're still people, right?" Vincent thought about Terence's careful catalogue. Deshawn's Shakespeare analysis. Andre's GED practice tests. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They're still people." Sophie looked up. "You okay? You seem different lately. Just tired." "Night shift takes adjustment, but that wasn't entirely true." Vincent wasn't just tired. He was conflicted. Torn between the safe choice and the right choice. Between protecting his daughter's security and honoring his own sense of what mattered. That night when he returned to work, Vincent found a small note tucked into his locker. Just 3 words in careful handwriting. "Thank you, TB." Vincent held the note for a long moment, then tucked it away and headed to his rounds. He didn't report what he'd found, didn't document the unauthorized program, didn't mention the catalogue or the textbooks or the maintenance closet transformed into a secret classroom. Instead, during his rounds that night, Vincent made sure to walk past the closet at exactly 3:15, late enough that most guards would be in the break room, early enough that the inmates meeting inside would have time to finish their session and return to cells before the next official check. It wasn't much, just a small adjustment to his routine. But Terence was right about one thing. Once you made a choice, you couldn't unmake it. Vincent had made his choice. Over the following weeks, Vincent's involvement with the education program deepened in small, careful increments. He never spoke directly about it with the inmates, never acknowledged what he knew, but his rounds became predictable in ways that mattered. 3:15 a.m. He'd be checking C block while the study group met in the D3 maintenance closet. 4:30, he'd take his break, giving them time to return materials and disperse. When he did walk past the closet, he'd make sure his footsteps were loud, giving anyone inside time to appear occupied with legitimate activities. The inmates noticed. Vincent could see it in their eyes during rounds, gratitude mixed with caution. They understood he was taking a risk, even if a small one. One night, in his 3rd month at Stonewall, Vincent encountered a new face in the program. Cell D198, a man named Andre Washington, stood at his door during rounds, a GED practice book visible on his bunk. "Officer Merrick," Andre said quietly as Vincent passed. "Got a question about something mathematical. You any good with algebra?" Vincent stopped, glancing around the empty tier. "Been a long time." "Yeah, me too." Andre held up a worksheet through the window. "Trying to figure out these quadratic equations. The book explains it, but I keep getting stuck on the same problem." Vincent studied the worksheet. The work shown was methodical, careful. Andre had been trying different approaches, erasing and reworking each attempt. "You're setting up the formula right," Vincent said. "But here, you're dropping the negative sign when you move it to the other side. That's throwing off your final answer." Andre looked at the problem again, then his face cleared. "Oh man, I've been making that same mistake on like 6 problems. That's why none of my answers match the key. Check the others with that in mind. Bet they'll work out. Appreciate it." Andre hesitated. "Terence said you're solid, that we can trust you. Just wanted you to know what you're doing, giving us space to study. It matters. To all of us." Vincent nodded, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Just doing my rounds." "Right." Andre's smile suggested he understood the necessary fiction. "Just doing your rounds." 2 nights later, Vincent met Father Brennan for the first time. The chaplain was leaving the facility after evening services when Vincent arrived for his shift. Terence had mentioned the priest, but seeing him in person added new context to the operation. Father Brennan was perhaps 60, grey hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But when he shook Vincent's hand, his grip was firm and his gaze assessing. "Vincent Merrick," Brennan said. "I've heard about you. Father, walk with me a moment?" Brennan gestured toward the parking lot, away from the facility's cameras and listening ears. They walked in silence until they reached Brennan's car. "I've been supporting Terence's program for 2 years," Brennan said without preamble. "Bringing in textbooks, coordinating with correspondence schools, helping with administrative paperwork. It started small, a few men wanting to study scripture more seriously. Then Terence realized he could teach them more than just biblical interpretation. "You're taking a significant risk," Vincent observed. "We all are, but some things are worth the risk." Brennan pulled a worn sociology textbook from his car. "This is for Deshawn. His current text is falling apart. I'm not supposed to bring in unauthorized materials, but I've found that acting like I belong usually means nobody questions me." He handed the book to Vincent. "I can't get materials directly to the men anymore. Warden's office has been watching me more closely. But if someone else were to leave this in, say, the maintenance closet on D3... "I understand." Brennan studied him carefully. "Terence says you have a daughter. 15? Sophie, that's why you're helping. You see these men as someone's son, someone's father. You see them as human." Vincent thought about his conversation with Sophie about her essay, about rehabilitation and second chances. "I see men trying to better themselves against impossible odds. Seems like that should be encouraged, not punished. The system doesn't agree. Education is expensive. It requires staff, resources, oversight. Easier to warehouse people than to transform them." Brennan's voice carried decades of frustration. "I've been a prison chaplain for 15 years. I've seen men leave here barely able to read, with no job skills, no support system. Then we wonder why they come back. How many have completed programs through your group?" 6 GED graduates. 2 associate degrees in progress. One man earned his bachelor's while inside. That was before I arrived, before security tightened. He's out now, working as a counselor for at-risk youth." Brennan smiled. "The recidivism rate for inmates who complete higher education programs is under 12%. For the general population leaving Stonewall, it's over 60%. Education works. The state just refuses to fund it adequately." Vincent took the sociology textbook. "I'll make sure Deshawn gets this." "Thank you." Brennan hesitated. "One more thing. Be careful around Officer Dixon. He works day shift, but he's been asking questions about D Block, about unusual inmate activities. He's not sympathetic to rehabilitation efforts. I'll keep that in mind." That night, Vincent left the textbook in the maintenance closet during his rounds. By morning, it was gone. The program continued expanding carefully. Vincent learned that the study group met 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 3 a.m. On those nights, he made sure to be predictably elsewhere during that hour. The inmates came to trust his routine, to depend on the space he created for their education. But trust was a double-edged sword. One night, Vincent found Luis Herrera waiting by his cell door, agitation clear in his body language. "Officer Merrick," Luis said urgently, "need to talk to you about something." "What's wrong?" "There's a guy, Titus Monroe, runs one of the gangs in D Block. He's been asking questions about why certain guys are up late, why we're not joining his business operations. He knows something's going on." Vincent felt a chill. Gang involvement was the nightmare scenario Terence had warned about. What's he said specifically? "Just watching. Making comments about how reading books doesn't make you money. How education is for people who've forgotten where they come from." Luis gripped the cell bars. "Thing is, I used to run with Titus's crew. That's how I ended up in here. He thinks I should still be loyal to that life. What do you want to do?" "Keep studying." Luis's voice was fierce. "I got a daughter I've never met. 3 years old. Her mom won't even let me see pictures because she's ashamed of who I am. I'm getting out in 4 years, and I want to be someone my little girl can meet without her mom being scared." But Titus, he can make life real hard in here if he wants. Vincent considered the problem. Gang dynamics were beyond his authority. But the fear in Luis's eyes was real and justified. Keep your head down, Vincent advised. Don't antagonize him, but don't abandon the program either. I'll talk to Sergeant Rains about increasing patrols in D Block. That might make it worse. More attention. You have a better idea? Luis shook his head. Just thank you for believing we're worth the trouble. After that conversation, Vincent became more vigilant during his rounds. He noticed Titus Monroe now, a powerfully built man in his 40s, covered in gang tattoos, who held court in the D Block common area during recreation time. Other inmates deferred to him. Guards gave him wide berth. Titus noticed Vincent's attention too. Their eyes met one night during rounds, and Vincent saw the calculation there. Titus was assessing him, figuring out whose side he was on. The tension affected Sophie too, though Vincent tried to shield her from his work stress. One evening before his shift, she looked up from her homework with worry creasing her forehead. "Dad, are you in some kind of trouble?" "Why would you think that? You've been distracted. You barely sleep anymore. And yesterday, I heard you on the phone telling someone you couldn't promise anything, but you'd try your best." "That sounds like trouble." Vincent set down his coffee cup. "Work is complicated right now, but I'm handling it. Is it dangerous?" He wanted to lie, to reassure her that everything was fine. But Sophie deserved more respect than that. "Sometimes, but most jobs have risks. I'm careful. Mom always said you were the kind of person who helped people even when it cost you something." Sophie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love that about you. But I also need you to be okay. I can't lose you too." Vincent pulled her into a hug. "You're not going to lose me. I promise. Everything I do is so we can stay together, keep moving forward. You understand?" She nodded against his shoulder, but Vincent felt the weight of his promise. He was making choices that could cost him his job, his safety, possibly more. All for a group of inmates he'd known for only a few months. But when he thought about stopping, about returning to the simple neutrality Rains had advised on his first night, Vincent remembered Andre's careful practice problems, Deshawn's Shakespeare analysis, Terence's library catalogue, Luis's determination to become someone his daughter could meet without fear. These men were trying to claw their way out of the hole they'd dug. The least Vincent could do was not kick dirt back down on them. That night at work, Vincent found another note in his locker. This one was longer, written in Deshawn's handwriting. "Officer Merrick, we know you're putting yourself at risk for us. We don't take that lightly. If this becomes too dangerous, we'll understand if you need to step back. But if you can keep giving us this chance, we won't waste it. You're helping us become the men we should have been all along. That's worth more than you know." The D Block study group. Vincent folded the note carefully and tucked it in his wallet next to Sophie's photograph. 2 images of the future he was trying to protect. 2 reasons to keep going, even as the situation grew more complicated. He headed to his rounds, keys jangling at his belt, ready for another night of walking the line between duty and conscience. The change in atmosphere at Stonewall was subtle at first, like the shift in air pressure before a storm. Vincent felt it during his rounds. Conversations that stopped abruptly when he approached, eyes tracking his movements with new intensity, a tension that hadn't existed before. It had been 2 months since Vincent started protecting the education program. In that time, the group had grown more confident, more organized. They'd added new members, expanded their meeting times, even started planning a small ceremony for their first official graduate. Andre Washington had passed his GED exam. Terence told Vincent about it during a brief conversation in the maintenance closet. The old man's face glowed with pride as he showed Vincent the official certificate that had arrived through Father Brennan's careful coordination. "And 20 years, Terence said, holding the certificate like it was made of gold. "And 20 years Andre's been in and out of the system. First time he's accomplished something legitimate. First time he's proven to himself he's more than the streets that raised him." The certificate was simple, just Andre's name, the date, and the official GED seal. But Vincent understood what it represented. Proof that change was possible, Evidence that these men weren't just serving time, they were transforming themselves. "We want to do something to acknowledge it," Terence continued. "Nothing big, just the study group, maybe 10 minutes in the storage room. Let Andre know his achievement matters." "When?" Vincent asked. "Friday night, 3 a.m., same as our regular meeting time." Vincent nodded. "I'll make sure D block is clear." Friday arrived with unseasonable cold, the kind that seeped through Stonewall's concrete walls and settled in your bones. Vincent started his shift at 11, checking in with Sergeant Rains as usual. "Quiet night expected," Rains said, though something in his voice suggested otherwise. "But keep sharp on D block. Administration's been asking questions about inmate activities." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that means someone's been talking." Rains met Vincent's eyes with significance. "You know anything about unauthorized inmate gatherings? Educational materials that aren't going through proper channels?" Vincent kept his expression neutral. "Just what I see on my rounds. Inmates reading mostly. Nothing that seems problematic." "See that it stays that way." Rains turned back to his paperwork, but added, "Watch yourself, Merrick. You're a good guard. Would hate to see you get caught up in something that costs you your job." The warning was clear. Someone had noticed. Someone was watching. Vincent carried that knowledge through his early rounds, hyper-aware of his surroundings. At 3 a.m., he positioned himself at the far end of C block while the study group met in the D3 maintenance closet. From his position, he could see anyone approaching and buy them time to disperse, if necessary. At 3:20, a door clanged shut somewhere above him. Vincent froze, listening. Footsteps on the metal stairs. Someone was doing an unscheduled round through D block. Vincent moved quickly, climbing to D3, just as Officer Dixon emerged from the stairwell. Dixon was day shift. He had no business here at 3 in the morning. "Dixon," Vincent said evenly, "didn't know you were working nights." "Covering for someone." Dixon's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing up here? Your sector is C and D, but you should be on the lower tiers at this hour. Heard a noise." "Checking it out." "Right." Dixon moved past Vincent toward the maintenance closet. "I'll help you check. Been meaning to inspect that storage area anyway. Heard rumors about contraband being stashed up here." Vincent's pulse quickened. The study group was in that closet right now. 10 inmates, including Andre with his GED certificate. Textbooks and materials spread out. No way to hide it all in time. "Already checked it," Vincent said. "Nothing but cleaning supplies." "Then you won't mind if I verify." Dixon's hand moved to the doorknob. Vincent stepped forward, blocking his path. "Dixon, there's nothing in there. You're wasting time we should be using to patrol the actual cell blocks." "Step aside, Merrick." "No." The word hung between them, heavy with implications. Dixon's expression hardened. "You refusing a direct order from a senior officer?" "I'm suggesting we follow proper protocol. If you want to search that closet, file the paperwork and do it during day shift with proper authorization." "I don't need authorization to open a storage closet in my own facility." Behind the door, Vincent heard the faintest scraping sound. Someone moving. The inmates knew they were seconds from discovery. Dixon heard it too. His hand reached for his radio. "Wait," Vincent said. "Before you call this in, ask yourself why you're really here. At 3 in the morning, off your normal shift, investigating rumors about D block. Who sent you?" Dixon's hand paused on the radio. "What are you talking about?" "Someone's been feeding you information about inmate activities. Someone who wants this particular group of inmates caught doing something unauthorized. Question is, why? What's their angle?" "I don't have an angle. I'm doing my job. Are you?" Vincent lowered his voice. "Or are you running interference for someone who doesn't want these inmates getting education? Someone who profits from keeping them ignorant and controllable?" Dixon's face flushed with anger. "You don't know what you're talking about. Then prove me wrong. Walk away. Come back during day shift with proper documentation. Search the whole block if you want. But right now, at 3 in the morning, based on anonymous rumors, this looks like harassment, not legitimate security protocol." For a long moment, Dixon just stared at him. Behind the door, the silence was absolute. 10 men, holding their breath, waiting to see if their futures would be destroyed by a random inspection. Finally, Dixon stepped back. "You're making a mistake, Merrick. Whatever you think you're protecting, it's going to cost you." Maybe, but I'll sleep fine knowing I followed proper procedure. Dixon turned and walked back toward the stairwell, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Only after he'd descended to the lower level did Vincent allow himself to breathe. He knocked quietly on the closet door. "He's gone." The door opened a crack and Terence's face appeared. "Thank you. You need to pack up now and you can't meet here anymore. He'll be back with authorization, probably as soon as day shift starts." "Understood." Terence opened the door wider, revealing the study group inside. They moved quickly, gathering books and materials with practiced efficiency. Andre held his GED certificate carefully, protecting it as they dispersed. As Deshawn passed, he stopped. That was brave. Stupid, but brave. Just doing my job." "No," Deshawn said quietly. "You just put your job on the line for us. That's something different. Something more." After they'd all returned to their cells, Vincent stood alone in the empty corridor. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline and fear catching up with him now that the immediate crisis had passed. He'd crossed another line tonight, not just looking away or facilitating from a distance, but actively obstructing another guard. Lying about what he knew, protecting the program at direct risk to his own position. The next morning, Vincent arrived home to find Sophie already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. "How was work?" she asked without looking up. "Complicated. You say that a lot lately." She finally looked at him, and Vincent saw the worry in her eyes. "Dad, are we going to be okay?" "Like really okay?" "What brought this on?" "I heard you talking to yourself in the driveway. You sat in the truck for like 10 minutes before coming inside. That's not normal." Vincent sat down across from her. "I might have made some choices at work that could have consequences. I don't know yet, but I want you to know, whatever I've done, I did it because I thought it was right. Not because it was safe or easy, but because it was right." That sounds like something Mom would say. "Your mother was a good person. She taught me that sometimes the right choice is the hard choice." Sophie closed her laptop. "Are you going to lose your job?" "I don't know, maybe. I hope not. And if you do?" Vincent reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we'll figure something else out, together, like we always do. But I won't apologize for trying to help people who needed help, even if it costs me something." Sophie squeezed his hand. "I know. That's who you are. I just wish being a good person wasn't so expensive." Vincent couldn't help but smile at that. "Yeah, me too." That night when he returned to work, Vincent found a formal written warning in his locker. Subject: insubordination and failure to cooperate with fellow officer. Dixon had filed a complaint. Sergeant Rains called Vincent into his office an hour into the shift. "Want to tell me what happened between you and Dixon last night?" Rains asked, the warning letter on his desk between them. Vincent considered lying, deflecting. But he was tired of the deception. "I prevented him from conducting an unauthorized search of D Block." "Why?" "Because I knew what he'd find, and I didn't think the inmates involved deserved to be punished for it." Rains leaned back in his chair, studying Vincent for a long moment. "You understand this could cost you your job?" "Yes, sir. And you did it anyway?" "Yes, sir." Rains picked up the warning letter, read it over again, then did something Vincent didn't expect. He tore it in half. "Dixon filed this through improper channels," Rains said. "Didn't follow protocol. I'm rejecting it on procedural grounds." He met Vincent's eyes. "But that only buys you time. Dixon's going to keep pushing, and eventually someone higher up is going to ask questions I can't deflect. You understand what I'm telling you?" "I think so." "Then be smarter about how you help them. Because if you go down, that program goes down with you." Vincent left the office with more questions than answers. Why had Rains protected him? What did the sergeant really know about the education program? And how much longer could they all keep dancing around the truth before everything came crashing down? The knife changed everything. It was discovered during a routine cell sweep on a Tuesday morning. 3 days after Vincent's confrontation with Dixon, administration ordered a full lockdown. Every cell searched. Every inmate confined, all programs and activities suspended until further notice. Vincent arrived for his shift that evening to find Stonewall transformed into something even more oppressive than usual. Guards in riot gear patrolled the tiers. The usual low hum of conversation was replaced by tense silence. 2,000 men locked in their cells waiting. Weapons cache in C block, Rains briefed the night shift. 3 shanks, 1 actual knife, probably smuggled in through visitor services. Warden's furious. This lockdown stays in effect until we're satisfied there's nothing else hidden. How long? Had someone asked. Days, maybe weeks. Depends on what else we find. Vincent felt his stomach drop. The lockdown meant no movement, no gatherings, no way for the study group to meet or even pass materials between cells. Everything they'd built was suddenly frozen. During his rounds that night, Vincent walked past silent cells. Inmates pressed against their doors, demanding information, protesting the lockdown. But it was the faces in D block that haunted him. Deshawn, standing at his window with his philosophy textbook visible on the bunk behind him, unable to study without the discussion group. Andre, pacing his small cell, all his forward momentum suddenly arrested. Luis, sitting on his bunk with his head in his hands. And Terence, standing at his cell door with quiet dignity, who just nodded when Vincent passed. A nod that said, "We knew this could happen. We'll endure." But enduring became harder as the lockdown extended. Day 3, administration began confiscating materials deemed unauthorized. Dixon led the search teams through D block, using the weapons sweep as cover to look for anything that violated protocol. Vincent watched helplessly as Dixon emerged from the maintenance closet on D3, carrying an armload of textbooks. "Look what I found," Dixon announced loudly, making sure every inmate on the tier could hear. Unauthorized educational materials, no proper documentation, no approval from the warden's office. He smiled at Vincent. Guess those rumors were true after all. The textbooks were logged as contraband. The inmates who'd been using them were written up for possession of unauthorized materials. By the end of day 4, 6 men from the study group were facing disciplinary hearings. Vincent tried to intervene, going to Rains with a carefully worded explanation. Those materials were educational. The men were studying on their own time. I don't see how that violates security. Materials brought into the facility without authorization violate protocol, Rains replied, though his tone suggested he agreed with Vincent. And Dixon's within his rights to confiscate them, so 6 men get punished for trying to better themselves. 6 men get punished for violating rules. Rains lowered his voice. I warned you this would happen. Dixon wants to shut down anything that looks like unauthorized organization. The weapons cache gave him the excuse he needed. On day 5, the situation escalated. Titus Monroe, the gang leader Luis had warned about, used the chaos to consolidate power. With everyone confined to cells, he couldn't move freely, but he could send messages through the ventilation system and brief moments when cell doors opened for meal delivery. Vincent overheard fragments during rounds, threats about cooperation, warnings about what happened to inmates who thought they were better than everyone else. Titus was using the lockdown to remind people who really controlled D block. Luis was his primary target. During meal delivery, Vincent heard raised voices from Luis's cell. You think your book's going to protect you? If someone called from a nearby cell. Titus says you forgot where you came from. Says when this lockdown ends, you need to remember your real family. Luis didn't respond, but when Vincent passed his cell, the younger man's face was drawn with fear. I can't do anything while everyone's locked down, Vincent said quietly. But when this ends, I'm dead. Luis's voice was flat. Or I go back to Titus's crew. Those are my options. The education thing, that's over. Dixon made sure of that. Vincent wanted to argue, to offer reassurance. But what could he say? Dixon had destroyed their materials. The men were facing discipline, and Titus was using the disruption to reclaim anyone who drifted from his control. The lockdown extended into its 2nd week. Vincent watched the study group members deteriorate under the combination of confinement, lost hope, and increasing pressure. Deshawn stopped reading. Andre stopped doing his practice problems. Even Terence seemed diminished, sitting motionless in his cell hour after hour. At home, Sophie noticed Vincent's growing despair. You're barely eating, she said one evening. And you look like you haven't slept in days. Work is difficult right now. Is someone hurt? Is it dangerous? Vincent thought about how to explain it. People I've come to care about are going through something hard, and I can't help them. The inmates, Sophie said. It wasn't a question. Vincent looked at her, surprised. How did you? Dad, I'm not stupid. You've been coming home stressed for months. You talk in your sleep sometimes about men named Andre and Deshawn. You had that note in your wallet from someone with the initials TB. She set down her fork. You're trying to help them, aren't you? The inmates who want to learn? There was no point denying it. Yes, and someone's trying to stop you. It's more complicated than that. There are rules, procedures. I've been bending them to protect something I believe in. Now there are consequences. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Remember my essay about criminal justice reform? You helped me understand that rehabilitation matters more than punishment, that people deserve second chances. She met his eyes. You taught me that. Now you're living it. I think that's brave. Brave or stupid? Maybe both. She smiled slightly. But mostly brave. Vincent felt something loosen in his chest. His daughter understood. More than that, she approved. Whatever happened at work, at least he had this, Sophie's respect, her understanding of why he'd made the choices he had. But the situation at Stonewall continued to deteriorate. On day 9 of the lockdown, Vincent was called to a meeting with the warden. Warden Castellano was in his 60s, career corrections officer who'd run Stonewall for 12 years. He sat behind his desk like a judge, with Dixon standing beside him and Raines positioned near the door. Officer Merrick, Castellano began, I've been reviewing reports about unauthorized inmate activities in D Block. Officer Dixon has documented evidence of an organized education program operating without official sanction. He also reports that you've been obstructing his investigations into this matter. Vincent kept his expression neutral. I've been following standard patrol protocols, sir. Have you been aware of inmates conducting unauthorized study groups? This was the moment. Vincent could lie, deny everything, try to save his job. Or he could tell the truth and face whatever came next. He thought about Sophie's words, about being brave, about living the values he'd tried to teach her. Yes, sir. I've been aware. And you didn't report it? No, sir. Why not? Vincent chose his words carefully. Because the inmates involved were studying legitimate educational materials. They were working toward GEDs and college credits. They weren't engaged in gang activity or planning violence. They were trying to better themselves. I saw no security threat, so I saw no reason to interfere. The threat, Dixon interjected, is that any unauthorized inmate organization undermines institutional control. Today, it's study groups. Tomorrow, it's something worse. Or tomorrow it's 6 men leaving this facility with education and hope instead of rage and desperation, Vincent countered. Recidivism rates for inmates who complete educational programs. I'm aware of the statistics, Castellano interrupted. But this facility has procedures for authorized education programs. Procedures that ensure oversight, safety, and accountability. What you allowed was none of those things. What I allowed was men trying to change their lives in a system that gives them no official avenue to do so. Castellano's expression hardened. Officer Merrick, you're suspended pending a full investigation. 2 weeks without pay. During that time, we'll review your conduct and determine if further disciplinary action is warranted, up to and including termination. The words hit like physical blows. 2 weeks without pay. Possible termination. Vincent thought about his mortgage payment, Sophie's school expenses, bills already stretching too thin. I understand, sir. You're dismissed. Leave your badge and keys with Sergeant Raines. Vincent stood, moving toward the door on autopilot. As he passed Raines, the sergeant's expression was unreadable. In the hallway, Vincent removed his badge. The symbol of his last-chance job, the thing that had kept him and Sophie afloat, and handed it to Raines along with his facility keys. I'm sorry, Raines said quietly. For what? You warned me this would happen. I'm sorry that doing the right thing costs so much. Raines glanced back at the warden's office. For what it's worth, you made a difference. Those men in D Block, they'll remember what you did for them. Lot of good that does if I can't pay my mortgage. Vincent left Stonewall that morning knowing he might never return. As he drove home through early daylight, he thought about how to tell Sophie, how to explain that his principles had cost them their financial security, how to make her understand that he'd do it all again, even knowing the cost. When he pulled into the driveway, Sophie was waiting on the porch. One look at his face told her everything. "You lost your job," she said. "Suspended, maybe terminated." Vincent sat down beside her. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know we needed that income. I know this makes everything harder." Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. "You did the right thing. We'll figure out the rest." Vincent put his arm around her, grateful beyond words for her faith in him. But gratitude didn't pay bills, and faith didn't change the fact that he'd sacrificed their security for a principle. The question now was whether that principle had been worth the price. Vincent spent the first 3 days of his suspension in a fog of worry and inaction. He sent out job applications, knowing his chances were slim. A suspended corrections officer under investigation wasn't an attractive hire. He updated his resume, highlighting his construction background, hoping someone would overlook the gap in his employment. Sophie was supportive but worried. Vincent could see it in the way she started checking prices at the grocery store, in how she mentioned maybe getting a part-time job after school. She was 15. She shouldn't have to worry about keeping the lights on. On the 4th day, Vincent's phone rang. "Father Brennan." "I heard what happened," the priest said without preamble. "I'm sorry. This is partially my fault. I should have been more careful bringing in materials. You were trying to help. We all were. Still, your sacrifice shouldn't go unacknowledged. The men asked me to tell you they're grateful, and they want you to know they're not giving up. Even with the materials confiscated, even facing discipline, they're continuing to study. They're sharing what they remember, teaching each other, keeping the program alive however they can." Vincent felt something stir in his chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. "That's good to hear. There's something else." Brennan's voice dropped. "Something you should know about Officer Dixon. He's not acting alone." "What do you mean?" "I've been doing some investigating, talking to people. Dixon is part of a larger operation within the prison. Guards running contraband. Phones, drugs, other items. They bring them in, sell them to inmates or gang leaders, pocket the money. It's been going on for years." Vincent's mind raced. "What does that have to do with the education program?" "Everything. Think about it. When inmates are busy studying, they're not buying contraband. When they're focused on bettering themselves, they're less desperate, less likely to pay inflated prices for illegal items. The education program was cutting into Dixon's profits. He needed it shut down. That's a serious accusation. I know, but I have evidence. Not enough to prove it in court, but enough to know it's true. And there's more. Warden Castellano knows. He's been taking a cut." Vincent sat down heavily. If what Brennan said was true, this went far beyond an unauthorized study group. This was systemic corruption, with the education program caught in the crossfire. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're really up against. And because," Brennan hesitated, "because I think there's someone at Stonewall who might help you. Someone who's been protecting the program from the inside all along." "Who?" "Sergeant Raines." That evening, Vincent received a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Murphy's Diner, 9 p.m. Come alone." Raines. Vincent arrived at the diner to find Raines sitting in a back booth, coffee cup in front of him, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Thanks for coming," Raines said as Vincent slid into the opposite seat. "Father Brennan called me. Told me some things about Dixon." "Then you know more than I thought." Raines pulled out a manila folder and pushed it across the table. "I need to show you something." Vincent opened the folder. Inside were personnel records, incident reports, financial documents, all marked confidential. "Where did you get these?" "I've been collecting them for 2 years, ever since I figured out what Dixon and his crew were doing." Raines tapped the top document. "Read Vincent scanned the papers. They detailed a pattern of suspicious incidents: contraband found, but never properly logged, inmates with unexplained cash, guards with lifestyles that didn't match their salaries. Dixon's name appeared repeatedly. But what caught Vincent's attention was another document underneath, a proposal from 20 years earlier. Educational Rehabilitation Initiative for Stonewall Correctional Facility. The author's name, Howard Raines. "You tried to start a legitimate education program," Vincent said, looking up. 23 years ago. I was young, idealistic. Believed the system could change if good people pushed hard enough." Raines's face was bitter. "Warden at the time, not Castellano, his predecessor, blocked it. Said education programs were expensive, that inmates didn't deserve special treatment. Later I found out the real reason. The warden was taking kickbacks from guards running contraband. Education threatened that income stream. So you've known about the corruption for 20 years. Known about it. Couldn't prove it. Couldn't stop it." Raines drank his coffee, grimacing like it tasted of ash. "I learned to survive by keeping my head down. Made sergeant, stayed in that position long enough that everyone stopped noticing me. I became part of the furniture. Reliable old Raines, never causing trouble, never asking questions. But you protected the study group, because when Terence started his program 3 years ago, I saw my chance. A second opportunity to do what I'd failed to do the first time. I couldn't start an official program, but I could protect an unofficial one. So I ran interference. Kept Dixon away from D Block when possible. Made sure the right guards were assigned to shifts when the men met. Small things that added up." Vincent studied the older man. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you got caught doing what I should have done, standing up openly instead of hiding in the shadows. You lost your job for those men. That took courage I didn't have." Raines leaned forward. "And because I think we can expose Dixon, stop the corruption. Maybe even save the education program in the process." "How?" Raines pulled out another document, a proposal for a formal investigation into guard misconduct. "I've been gathering evidence for 2 years, but I couldn't act alone. No one would believe a sergeant with an old grudge. But if we worked together, a suspended officer who witnessed the retaliation, a veteran sergeant with documentation of corruption, a priest who can testify about the program's legitimacy, we might have enough to force the State Corrections Board to investigate." Vincent thought about the risks. He was already suspended, already facing termination. But this would make him a whistleblower, would guarantee he'd never work in corrections again. It might even put him in legal jeopardy if the corruption went as deep as Raines suggested. But he thought about Deshawn's Shakespeare analysis, Andre's GED certificate, Luis's desperate hope to become someone his daughter could meet, Terence's quiet dignity in the face of systematic oppression. "What do you need from me?" Vincent asked. Over the next hour, Raines laid out his plan. They'd need detailed testimony about Dixon's interference with the education program. They'd need proof that the contraband operation existed and that Dixon was part of it. They'd need to connect the dots between the guard corruption and the systematic suppression of rehabilitation efforts. "There's someone in the State Corrections Oversight Office," Raines said. "Inspector named Margaret Chen. She's been trying to investigate Stonewall for 3 years, but Castellano has political connections that keep blocking her. If we bring her solid evidence, she can force an investigation that bypasses the normal channels. And if we're wrong, if the evidence isn't solid enough, then we've destroyed our careers for nothing. Dixon will make sure we never work again. Castellano might even press charges, obstruction, conspiracy, who knows what else." Vincent thought about Sophie, about their precarious finances, about how much worse things could get if this went wrong. But he also thought about Terence's words from months ago. Dignity means being willing to lose everything for what's right. "When do we start?" Vincent asked. Raines pulled out a small recording device. "Tomorrow. I need you to wear this during a meeting I've arranged with Dixon. I'm going to tell him I know about his operation and see if he'll talk. With you suspended, he might think I'm looking to join his crew, make some extra money before retirement. He'll be suspicious, probably, but he's also arrogant, thinks he's untouchable. That arrogance might make him careless. Vincent took the recording device, feeling its weight in his palm. This small piece of technology could either save the education program or bury him completely. "There's something else you should know," Rains said quietly. "The inmates, when they heard you'd been suspended, they started organizing, writing statements about what the program meant to them, documenting their progress. They want to testify if it comes to that, even though it could hurt their parole chances. They shouldn't risk that. They say you risked everything for them. Least they can do is return the favor." Rains stood, leaving money on the table for the coffee. "Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m., old warehouse on 7th Street. I'll have Dixon there. You stay hidden, record everything. After that," he paused, "after that we go to Inspector Chen and hope the evidence is enough." Vincent drove home with the recording device hidden in his jacket pocket. When he arrived, Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen table. "You okay?" she asked, looking up. "You seem different." Vincent sat down across from her. "I need to tell you something. Tomorrow I'm going to do something that might make our situation better, or might make it much worse. If it goes wrong, we could lose the house. Might have to move, start over somewhere else." Sophie's eyes widened, but she didn't panic. "If it goes right. If it goes right, maybe I help stop some people who've been hurting others for a long time. Maybe I help protect something good that deserves to exist. The education program." "Yeah." Sophie closed her textbook. "Do you think you can win?" "Honestly, I don't know. The odds aren't great, but you're going to try anyway." "Yes." Sophie reached across the table and took his hand. "Then I'm proud of you. Whatever happens, I'm proud." Vincent squeezed her hand, grateful for her faith, even as fear churned in his stomach. Tomorrow would determine everything. His career, their financial future, the fate of the education program, and whether justice could prevail against entrenched corruption. He spent that night preparing, reviewing everything Rains had told him, checking the recording device, trying to anticipate what could go wrong. At 2 a.m., unable to sleep, Vincent pulled out his wallet and looked at Sophie's photograph. Next to it, he placed the note Deshawn had written months ago. Hamlet's tragedy isn't that he fails to act. It's that he knows what's right, but fears the cost of doing it. Tomorrow, Vincent would act. And whatever the cost, he'd pay it knowing he'd chosen courage over safety, principle over survival. The question was whether courage would be enough. The warehouse on 7th Street had been abandoned for years, its windows broken and walls covered in graffiti. Vincent arrived at 2:30, 30 minutes early as Rains had instructed. The recording device was taped to his chest, hidden beneath his shirt, its presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. Rains met him at the back entrance, checking to make sure no one had followed. "Dixon will be here at 3, Rains said, leading Vincent to a second-floor office that overlooked the main warehouse floor. "You'll record from up here. I'll be down there with him. If anything goes wrong, if he gets violent or suspicious, you run. Don't try to help me. Just get the recording to Inspector Chen. You think he'll actually confess?" "I think he'll say enough. Dixon's smart, but he's also greedy. And right now, he thinks he's won. You're suspended. The program's shut down. The inmates are facing discipline. He has no reason to suspect we're gathering evidence against him." Vincent tested the recording device one more time, then took his position in the upper office. Through the grimy window, he had a clear view of the warehouse floor where Rains waited. At precisely 3 o'clock, Dixon arrived. He looked around cautiously before approaching Rains, his body language tense and suspicious. "This better be important," Dixon said. "I don't like meeting off-site." "It's important," Rains's voice carried clearly in the empty warehouse. "I want in on your operation." Dixon's expression didn't change. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The contraband ring. Phones, drugs, whatever else you're moving through Stonewall. I know it exists. I know you're running it. And I know it's been profitable enough that you've been driving a car that costs more than your annual salary. Careful, Rains. Accusations like that can end careers." "I'm not accusing. I'm requesting to join." Rains pulled out a cigarette, lit it casually. "I'm 3 years from retirement. Pension's not going to be enough. Cost of living keeps going up. I figure I've spent 25 years in the system playing by the rules. Time to make some real money before I'm too old to enjoy it. Dixon studied him for a long moment. What brought this on? That business with Merrick. Watching a good man lose his job for protecting a bunch of inmates who wanted to read books made me realize how stupid it is to care about doing the right thing. Right thing doesn't pay bills, doesn't secure retirement, just gets you crushed by people smart enough to work the angles. And you think I'm working angles? I know you are. Question is whether you're willing to cut me in. Dixon walked a slow circle around Rains, thinking. Vincent held his breath, watching through the window. This was the moment. Either Dixon would take the bait or he'd walk away. What specifically do you think I'm doing? Dixon finally asked. Bringing in items inmates want. Phones mostly. Some drugs. Selling them at markup to gang leaders who distribute internally. You've got coverage from other guards who take a cut. Maybe from higher up too, though I'm guessing on that part. Dixon smiled slightly. You've been paying attention. Part of my job. And if I were doing something like that, hypothetically, why would I need you? Because Merrick's suspension has brought attention to D-Block. Administration's watching more closely. You need someone who can provide cover, someone above suspicion. Reliable old Rains, who's never caused trouble. I can make sure patrol schedules work in your favor. Make sure inspections happen when and where you want them. I'm in a position to be useful. Dixon considered this. Hypothetically, if such an operation existed, what percentage would you expect? 10% of gross. And I want to know who else is involved at the top. That's a lot to ask for someone just joining. I'm offering a lot. Without proper cover, your operation gets shut down. With me running interference, you can expand. Dixon pulled out his phone, checked something, then put it away. The percentage is negotiable, but you need to prove you're serious first. Prove you're not wearing a wire or trying to play hero like Merrick. Vincent's heart hammered. Had Dixon suspected? Was this whole thing about to fall apart? How do I prove that? Rains asked calmly. Tomorrow night, I need you to bring in a package. Phones, mostly. 5 of them. You'll get them through security. Deliver them to a contact in C Block. If you can do that without getting caught, without reporting it, then we'll talk about bringing you in fully. And if I refuse, then this conversation never happened. But you should know, if you refuse, I'll assume you're trying to build a case against me. That would be unfortunate. For both of us. The threat hung in the air. Rains nodded slowly. I'll do it. Tomorrow night. Good. Dixon headed toward the exit, then stopped. One more thing. That education program you've been protecting, it's done. Those inmates are being transferred to different facilities next week. Separated so they can't reorganize. The warden wants them scattered, wants to make sure this doesn't happen again. Seems excessive. Seems necessary. Can't have inmates thinking they can organize anything without authorization. That's a bad precedent. Dixon smiled coldly. Your friend Merrick cost those men their shot at redemption. Hope he thinks it was worth it. After Dixon left, Vincent came down from the office, his hands shaking. You got it all? Every word. Vincent checked the recording. Dixon's voice was clear, his admission of the operation unmistakable. But Vincent's mind was stuck on the final revelation. They're transferring the inmates, separating them. We expected retaliation. We expected discipline, maybe some restrictions. Not complete dismantling of the group. Deshawn, Andre, Luis, Terrence. They'll be sent to different facilities. Everything they've built together, gone. Rains's face was grim. Then we need to move fast. If we can expose the corruption before the transfers happen, maybe we can stop it. They drove directly to Inspector Margaret Chen's office. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed and direct. When Rains called ahead, she'd agreed to meet despite the late hour. Play it, she said after they'd explained the situation. They played Dixon's recorded conversation. Chen listened intently, taking notes, her expression darkening as the evidence mounted. This is good, she said when it finished. Probably enough to force an investigation. But here's the problem. Dixon didn't explicitly confess to anything. He spoke hypothetically. A good lawyer will argue this doesn't prove actual crimes. Just a theoretical discussion. What else do you need? Vincent asked. Concrete evidence. Documentation of money transfers. Witness testimony from inmates who've participated in the contraband purchases, physical evidence of the items being moved. Right now you have a suspicious conversation. I need proof of actual criminal activity. How long will that take? Rains asked. Weeks, maybe months. The inmates are being transferred next week. We don't have months. Chen leaned back in her chair. Then you need to get me that evidence faster. And you need to accept that even if we expose the corruption, it might not save the education program. The warden has authority to transfer inmates for security reasons. Even if we prove Dixon's corrupt, Castellano can still claim the transfers are justified. Vincent felt despair settling over him. They'd risked everything for a recording that might not be enough. The inmates would be scattered, the program would die, and he'd still lose his job. There's one more option, Chen said carefully. It's risky, probably crosses some legal lines, but it might get you what you need. What option? Rains asked. Dixon asked you to smuggle phones tomorrow night. What if you do it? But the phones have tracking software installed. We monitor where they go, who receives them, document the entire distribution chain. That gives us concrete evidence of the operation. That makes me an active participant in a crime, Rains said. Yes, which is why I can't officially suggest it. But hypothetically, if someone were to gather that evidence, it would be enough to force immediate action. We could raid the facility, arrest everyone involved, and freeze all inmate transfers, pending investigation. Vincent and Rains exchanged glances. I'll do it, Rains said. I've already spent 20 years watching corruption flourish. If I have to break some rules to stop it, that's a price I'm willing to pay. Count me in too, Vincent said. I'm already suspended. Might as well make it count. Chen pulled out paperwork. I can't officially authorize this, but I can tell you that if you bring me documented evidence of an active contraband operation, I'll have state police at Stonewall within hours. The inmates won't be transferred because the facility will be under investigation. The education program participants will be protected as witnesses. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Chen provided tracking-enabled phones that looked identical to the contraband Dixon was expecting. She explained the legal risks. If they were caught, they'd face criminal charges alongside the guards they were trying to expose. One more thing, Chen said as they prepared to leave. I've been investigating Stonewall for 3 years. Every time I get close, evidence disappears or witnesses recant. Warden Castellano has connections at the state level that have protected him. This is your one shot. If it fails, those connections will make sure no one can touch him again. Make it count. Vincent and Rains left the office as dawn broke over the city. They had less than 24 hours to prepare. Tomorrow night, they'd either expose the corruption at Stonewall or destroy themselves in the attempt. Vincent drove home to find Sophie awake, pacing the kitchen. I couldn't sleep, she said. Did it work? Did you get what you needed? Maybe. We have one more step tomorrow night. After that, Vincent pulled her into a hug. After that, either everything gets better or everything falls apart. There's no middle ground anymore. I'm scared, Sophie admitted. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. But beneath the fear was something else, purpose, clarity. For the first time in months, Vincent knew exactly what he needed to do. The path forward was terrifying, but it was clear. Tomorrow night would determine everything, and Vincent intended to make sure that when the truth came out, it would be loud enough that no one could ignore it. Vincent arrived at Stonewall at 10 p.m., though his suspension meant he had no official reason to be there. He parked 3 blocks away, keeping to the shadows as he approached the employee entrance where Rains waited. You sure about this? Rains asked, handing Vincent a visitor badge he'd forged. No, but I'm doing it anyway. They'd spent the day finalizing every detail. The tracking-enabled phones were hidden in a maintenance bag. Chen had positioned state police units 20 minutes away, ready to move the moment they had documented evidence. Everything hinged on the next few hours. Rains signed Vincent in using a falsified log entry. Security's lighter on night shift. Most guards are in C and D blocks. We bring the phones through the loading dock, store them in the D3 maintenance closet, then Dixon's contact retrieves them during 4 a.m. rounds. What if someone sees us? Then we abort and run. But I've been watching patterns for 2 years. Between midnight and 1 a.m., this corridor is empty. We'll have a window. They moved through the facility like ghosts, Vincent's heart hammering with each footstep. The prison felt different without his badge and authority. Now he was an intruder, someone who didn't belong. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. At the loading dock, Rains used his keys to access the delivery area. The phones were wrapped in maintenance supplies, disguised as routine equipment. They loaded them onto a cart and began the long walk to D Block. Halfway there, voices echoed from around the corner. "Someone's coming," Vincent whispered. They ducked into a storage room, pulling the door nearly closed. Through the gap, Vincent watched 2 guards pass. One of them was Dixon. "Transfers are scheduled for Monday," Dixon was saying. "Warden wants them separated before anyone asks questions about that education program. Once they're scattered across 3 facilities, the whole thing dies." "What about Rains?" the other guard asked. "You trust him?" "He's desperate. Desperate men are useful. After tonight, he's committed. Can't turn on us without incriminating himself." They passed, their voices fading. Vincent's hands were shaking. Monday. The transfers were scheduled for Monday, 3 days away. They were running out of time even faster than he'd thought. "Keep moving," Rains said quietly. They reached D Block without further incident. The maintenance closet on D3 was exactly where Terrence's study group had met for months. Now it would be used to store contraband that would bring down the corrupt guards who destroyed their program. Rains placed the phones in the back corner, hidden behind cleaning supplies. "Dixon's contact will retrieve these at 4 a.m. The tracking shows where they go, who receives them. By dawn, we'll have everything we need. And until then, we wait, monitor from Chen's command center. Hope nothing goes wrong." But something was already going wrong. As they turned to leave, the closet door swung open. Terrence stood there, confusion and recognition crossing his face. "Officer Merrick, what are you doing here?" "You're suspended." Vincent's mind raced. Terrence couldn't know what they were doing. If he interfered... "Terrence, I need you to trust me and go back to your cell." The old man's eyes moved to the maintenance bag, to Rains's tense posture, to the phones barely visible in the corner. Understanding dawned. "You're setting a trap," Terrence said slowly, "for the guards running contraband. How did you—" "I'm old, not stupid. We've known for years that certain guards were bringing things in, selling them to gangs. We stayed away from it, but you can't live in here without noticing." Terrence stepped closer. "Is this about helping us? The education program?" "It's about stopping the people who shut you down," Vincent said. "But if you're caught out of your cell, if anyone knows you saw this, I understand." Terrence's face was grave. "But you should know, something's happening tonight. Titus has been moving people into position. He knows the guard contraband operation exists, and he's planning to hijack it. Take the phones by force, establish his own control over the distribution." Vincent's stomach dropped. "When?" "Soon, maybe within the hour. His crew has been preparing for days, waiting for the next delivery." Rains cursed softly. "If Titus's gang attacks during the exchange, this whole thing falls apart. Evidence gets destroyed in the chaos. Dixon can claim it was an inmate operation all along." "We need to warn Chen," Vincent said. "Get the police here faster. No time. Titus moves at 4 a.m. We need to intercept him before then." Vincent pulled out his phone to call Chen, but there was no signal this deep in the facility. They'd have to get to an external line or the control room. "I can help," Terrence said. "The study group. We still communicate through the ventilation system. I can spread word that there's danger coming, get people to their cells, reduce the chaos when things pop off." "You'll put yourself at risk," Vincent said. "We're already at risk. Those transfers on Monday, they'll scatter everyone we've built. If exposing Dixon's operation is our last chance to save the program, then I'm helping." Terrence's voice was firm. "Besides, you risked your job for us. Least I can do is risk a few hours in solitary." Before Vincent could argue, Terrence moved to the ventilation grate and began tapping out a pattern, some kind of code. Within moments, answering taps came from cells down the tier. "Message is spreading," Terrence said. "Stay in cells, stay quiet, trouble coming. The education group will make sure word gets around." Won't stop Titus's core crew, but it'll reduce the number of inmates involved in whatever violence happens. Rains checked his watch. We've got maybe 30 minutes before Dixon's contact arrives. If Titus moves before then, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing the corridor in dim red light. But the damage was done. Someone had cut the main power, a deliberate action. That's Titus's signal, Terence said. He's moving now. From below, Vincent heard shouts, the sound of cell doors being forced open. Titus's gang was making their move, heading for the maintenance closet where the phones were hidden. We need to stop them, Vincent said. We're not armed, Rains replied. We can't fight a gang of inmates. Then we call for help. Get to the control room. Trigger the emergency response. They ran, Vincent and Rains racing toward the control center while Terence headed back toward his cell. Behind them, the sounds of chaos grew louder, inmates shouting, metal clanging against metal, the beginning of something violent. Vincent's mind flashed to Sophie's face, to her words, I'm proud of you. Whatever happens, he hoped she'd still be proud after tonight. Because the situation was spiraling beyond their control, and Vincent had no idea if they could stop what was coming. The riot had begun. The control room was chaos. Guards were scrambling to respond to the power outage, radios crackling with reports of violence in D Block. Vincent and Rains burst through the door, and every head turned. What the hell are you doing here, Merrick? One guard demanded. You're suspended. D Block is about to explode, Vincent said. Gang leader named Titus Monroe is making a move on contraband hidden in the D3 maintenance closet. We need emergency response now. Contraband? What contraband? Rains stepped forward. The contraband that Officer Dixon and others have been smuggling in for years. The Operation Warden Castellano has been protecting. We have evidence, and we need to secure that closet before Titus destroys it. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked shocked. Others looked guilty. You're making serious accusations, the senior guard said. And I can prove them. Rains pulled out his phone, starting to dial Inspector Chen. State police are standing by. But right now, we have inmates heading for that closet, and if they get there first, an explosion of sound from the monitors cut him off. Security cameras showed D Block erupting into violence. Titus's crew had reached the third tier, forcing open the maintenance closet. But they weren't alone. Dixon stood there, weapon drawn, facing down the gang members. He's trying to protect the evidence, Vincent said. If Titus gets those phones, Dixon can't sell them. He's going to fight. On screen, the confrontation escalated. Titus's crew rushed Dixon. A struggle ensued, brutal and quick. Dixon went down under multiple attackers. We need riot response, the senior guard said, reaching for the alarm. Wait, Rains said. Look, other inmates were emerging from their cells. Deshawn, Andre, Luis, others from the study group. But they weren't joining the violence. They were moving through the corridors, talking to people, calming the situation, preventing the isolated fight from becoming a full riot. On one monitor, Vincent saw Deshawn step between two inmates about to fight. Words were exchanged. The potential combatants separated, retreated to their cells. On another screen, Andre was speaking urgently to a group of younger inmates, gesturing for them to stay back, to not get involved in Titus's operation. They're containing it, Vincent said with wonder. The education group is stopping the riot before it spreads, but in the maintenance closet, things were getting worse. Titus had the phones now, and Dixon was on the ground, injured. The gang leader grabbed the contraband and started to retreat. Then Terence appeared in the doorway. The old man stood there, unarmed and unafraid, blocking Titus's exit. Get out of my way, old man, Titus growled. I don't think so. Terence's voice was calm, steady. This ends tonight. The corruption, the violence, all of it. You think you can stop me? No, but they can. Terence pointed to the cameras Vincent had forgotten about. The ones Inspector Chen had secretly activated. The ones that were recording everything, Dixon's contraband operation, Titus's attack, all of it documented. Titus's face changed as understanding hit. He'd been caught on camera assaulting a guard, stealing contraband. Even if he escaped tonight, the evidence would destroy him. "You set this up," Titus said. "You and that suspended guard." "This was a trap. This was justice," Terence replied. "Something this place hasn't seen in a long time." Sirens wailed outside. State police were arriving, responding to Inspector Chen's call. Within minutes, armed officers flooded into D Block, securing the area, arresting Titus's crew and Dixon both. Vincent and Rains rushed to the scene. They found Terence sitting calmly outside the maintenance closet, apparently unbothered by the chaos around him. "You shouldn't have confronted him," Vincent said. "He could have killed you, probably. But someone needed to hold the line until the cavalry arrived." Terence smiled slightly. "Besides, I'm 63 and serving life. Not much left to lose. You two, you have everything to lose. Seemed fairer if I took the risk." Inspector Chen arrived with state investigators, immediately taking control of the scene. She pulled Vincent and Rains aside. "We got it all," she said. "The recordings show Dixon with the contraband, Titus's attack, everything. Enough to arrest a dozen guards and prove the operation's existence." She paused. "But there's a problem. Dixon is claiming the whole thing was an inmate operation. Says he discovered the phones and was trying to confiscate them when Titus attacked." "That's a lie," Vincent said. "I know it is, but without proof of how those phones got there, it's his word against yours. And you're a suspended officer who entered the facility illegally tonight. Your testimony isn't exactly ironclad." Vincent felt his hope crumbling. They'd risked everything, and Dixon might still escape justice. Then Rains pulled out a small device. "Actually, we have proof. I recorded my conversation with Dixon yesterday. The one where he instructed me to smuggle in the phones. His voice explaining the operation, giving me specific instructions." He handed the recording to Chen. She listened, and her expression hardened. "This is enough. Combined with tonight's video evidence and the tracking data from the phones, we can prove the entire operation." She looked at Vincent and Rains. "You did it. You exposed the corruption." Over the next hour, arrests were made. Dixon, 3 other guards, and eventually Warden Castellano himself, brought out in handcuffs, his political connections suddenly unable to protect him from documented criminal activity. Vincent watched it unfold with a mix of relief and exhaustion. They'd won. Against impossible odds, they'd actually won. But the real victory came when Inspector Chen approached him with news. "The inmate transfers are cancelled," she said. "Pending investigation, all D Block inmates involved in the education program are being classified as protected witnesses. They'll stay at Stonewall and—" She smiled. "The State Corrections Board is authorizing a formal education initiative, properly funded, officially sanctioned. Everything you've been fighting for." Vincent found Terence being checked by paramedics. The old man looked exhausted but satisfied. "You did it," Vincent said. "You saved the program." "We did it," Terence corrected. "All of us. You, Rains, Father Brennan, every man who refused to give up on learning even when the system gave up on us." He gripped Vincent's hand. "Thank you. For seeing us as human. For believing we could change." As dawn broke over Stonewall, Vincent finally allowed himself to believe it was over. The corruption exposed. The program saved. Justice, however imperfect, finally served. 3 months had passed since the night Stonewall's corruption was exposed. Vincent stood in the parking lot, watching the sunrise paint the prison's grey walls in shades of gold and amber. But this time, he wasn't arriving for a desperate night shift. He was arriving as the newly appointed education coordinator. The suspension had been lifted after Inspector Chen's investigation cleared him of wrongdoing. The State Corrections Board had not only reinstated him, but offered a promotion, overseeing the formal education program they were implementing at Stonewall. It paid better than security ever had. More importantly, it meant something. Sophie had driven with him this morning, wanting to see the place that had consumed so much of their lives these past months. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said, studying the facility, "and hopefully better than it was." Vincent gathered the folders from his truck, curriculum plans, GED schedules, correspondence course applications. "Want to come inside? Meet some people?" They passed through security, Vincent's new badge granting access he'd fought so hard to protect. The guard at the checkpoint nodded respectfully. Word had spread about what Vincent had done, how he'd risked everything to expose the corruption. Sergeant Rains met them in the main corridor. He'd been promoted to deputy warden, interim administration, while the state searched for Castellano's permanent replacement. "Morning, Merrick. This must be Sophie." "Yes, sir. Your father's a good man," Rains said to Sophie. "Stubborn, occasionally reckless, but good. We're lucky to have him." They walked through the facility toward the new education wing. The space had been a storage area 3 months ago. Now it held desks, chairs, whiteboards, and shelves lined with textbooks. Real textbooks, ordered through proper channels, funded by the state. Father Brennan was there, arranging materials for the morning session. He'd been officially recognized as the program's volunteer coordinator, legitimizing the work he'd done in shadows for years. "Vincent, Sophie, welcome." Brennan smiled warmly. "We're expecting about 20 students this morning. GED prep and college correspondence courses. Next month, we're adding a vocational training component, carpentry, electrical work, computer skills." "How's attendance been?" Vincent asked. "Stronger than expected. Word's gotten around that this is real, that men who participate actually have a chance at something better when they're released." Brennan gestured to a bulletin board covered in certificates. 4 more GED graduates last month. Deshawn finished his philosophy course with high honors. Andre's been accepted to a community college's remote program. The door opened, and inmates began filing in for class. Vincent recognized most of them, the study group that had started all of this. They looked different now. More confident, more hopeful. Terence entered last, moving slowly but with quiet dignity. He saw Vincent and Sophie, and his weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Officer Merrick, or should I say Coordinator Merrick now?" "Terence, I want you to meet my daughter, Sophie." Terence shook her hand with old-fashioned courtesy. "Your father is a brave man. He risked everything to protect something he believed in. You should be very proud." "I am," Sophie said. "He told me about what you all did, how you kept studying even when it was dangerous. That's brave too, perhaps. Or perhaps we were just too stubborn to accept that we were beyond redemption." Terence looked around the education wing. "This room represents something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. Real hope, real change. Your father made that possible." Andre approached, textbooks under his arm. He'd filled out since Vincent first met him, looked healthier, more stable. "Mr. Merrick, got my acceptance letter from State Community College. Start classes next semester. They're even going to let me continue after I'm released next year." "That's outstanding." "Andre, yeah, and I got something else." Andre pulled out a photograph, a little boy, maybe 8 years old, smiling at the camera. "My son. His mama finally agreed to let me write to him. Sent me this picture. Says if I stay clean, keep up with my education, maybe I can meet him when I get out." Vincent saw the tears in Andre's eyes, the overwhelming gratitude of a man who'd been given a second chance he never expected. Luis was there too, working on an essay at one of the desks. He looked up when Vincent passed. "Just so you know, I'm applying to be a teaching assistant in here. Want to help other guys the way you and Terence helped me. Figure I can pay it forward." Deshawn arrived carrying a stack of books. "Morning, everyone. Ready for today's philosophy discussion? We're covering Plato's cave allegory." He noticed Vincent. "Still think about that Shakespeare page sometimes. The one I dropped that you returned to me. That's when I knew not all guards were the same. Some actually saw us as people." The morning class began with Terence at the front, teaching with the skill of someone who'd spent decades in classrooms before one terrible mistake changed everything. Vincent watched the inmates engage, debate, challenge each other intellectually. This was what rehabilitation looked like. Not punishment and warehousing, but education and transformation. During a break, Vincent and Sophie walked out to the courtyard. Through the fence, they could see the city beyond. "You changed their lives," Sophie said quietly. "They changed their own lives. I just protected the space where it could happen. That's more than most people would do." Vincent thought about the journey, from desperate single father taking any job available to someone willing to risk everything for principle. about the men who'd transformed from convicts he was supposed to guard into individuals he respected. "Mom would be proud of you," Sophie added. "Of both of us. You for doing what's right even when it cost you everything. Me for understanding why you had to." Vincent pulled her close. "We made it through. Not the way I planned. Not the life I imagined when I started Merrick Construction. But maybe this is better. Maybe this matters more." They stood there for a moment, father and daughter, watching the morning unfold over a place that had become something different than what it was meant to be. Not just a warehouse for broken men, but a place where transformation was possible. Where second chances existed for those brave enough to reach for them. Behind them, through the education wing windows, Vincent could see Terrence's class continuing. Men who'd been written off by society, proving every day that people could change if given the tools and the opportunity. In his wallet, Vincent still carried 2 photographs. Sophie smiling at her birthday party, and now beside it a new picture, the education program's first graduating class, certificates in hand, hope visible on every face. Both images represented the same thing: legacy, purpose, the future worth fighting for. As Vincent and Sophie headed back inside, he thought about the question from his first night at Stonewall. Could one man with nothing to lose become the guardian of hope in a place built to destroy it? The answer, he'd learned, wasn't about one man at all. It was about ordinary people making extraordinary choices. About believing in redemption when the world counseled despair. About protecting what matters, even at terrible cost. Vincent had walked into Stonewall expecting nothing but survival. He'd found something far more valuable: purpose, community, and proof that even in the darkest places, human dignity could flourish if someone was willing to defend it. The education program would continue. The men would keep learning, keep transforming, keep proving that second chances weren't naive idealism, but practical reality. And Vincent would be there protecting that hope, nurturing that transformation, ensuring that what they'd all fought for would endure. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but as he watched Terrence teach and Andre study and Deshawn debate, Vincent realized it was exactly the life he was meant to live.